The year 1999 in the western United States wasn't merely the closing act of the 20th century. It was a raucous, unpredictable, and at times surreal blend of natural disruptions, celebrity highs and lows, political developments, cultural shifts, and the kind of everyday oddities that only the American West could deliver. With California leading the charge, as it so often does, the region became a kaleidoscope of memorable moments that captured the spirit of a generation standing on the brink of a new millennium. Of course, while the Golden State basked in much of the limelight, its neighboring states contributed their own strange, significant, and sometimes sobering chapters to the story of 1999. The year kicked off with a jolt of pure adrenaline in the snowy peaks of Colorado as the mountain town of Crested Butte played host to the Winter X Games from January 14th through the 17th. Athletes from all over the country and the world descended on the Rockies to compete in gravity-defying events that pushed the limits of skiing, snowboarding, and snowmobiling. With roaring crowds, high-flying tricks, and a broadcast audience growing by the day, the Games weren't just a sporting event. They were a cultural statement. The West, with its rugged terrain and free-spirited attitude, had officially become the epicenter of extreme sports in America. Just a couple of weeks later, the energy shifted from mountain slopes to the football field. On January 31st, the Denver Broncos returned to the national spotlight in Super Bowl 33, riding the momentum of their 1998 victory and ready to prove it wasn't a fluke. Facing off against the Atlanta Falcons in Miami, the Broncos dominated the game with a 34-19 win, delivering a performance that thrilled fans and silenced any doubters. At the center of it all was legendary quarterback John Elway, who capped off his illustrious career with one last championship. For Elway, who had spent 16 seasons chasing greatness, it was the perfect way to step off the field, a storybook ending that gave Broncos fans a memory to last a lifetime. Off the stormy coast of Oregon on February 4th, the cargo ship New Carissa ran aground near Coos Bay, kicking off a slow-burning environmental crisis that would drag on for months. Originally carrying thousands of gallons of fuel oil, the vessel's grounding created a logistical nightmare for officials and environmentalists alike. Attempts to burn off the oil to prevent contamination only partly succeeded, and continued rough seas made salvage efforts dangerously complicated. As pieces of the ship eventually broke apart and washed ashore, concerns grew about long-term ecological damage to the coastline, local wildlife, and marine habitats. The incident prompted national attention and heavy scrutiny of maritime safety protocols. Meanwhile, far from the crashing Pacific waves, Arizona found itself at the center of an international legal controversy. On February 24th, the state executed Karl Legrand, a German national convicted in a 1982 armed robbery that had turned fatal. What made the case so contentious was not just the crime itself, but the fact that Legrand had been denied consular access, a right protected under the Vienna Convention, to which the United States is a signatory. The German government protested loudly, and the case escalated all the way to the International Court of Justice at The Hague. Despite global pressure and legal appeals, Arizona went ahead with the execution, straining diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Germany and raising difficult questions about the intersection of international law, state sovereignty, and capital punishment. In early March, Las Vegas doubled down on its reputation for opulence and spectacle with the grand opening of Mandalay Bay on March 2nd. The gleaming gold-colored resort and casino added another layer of extravagance to the Strip, boasting a tropical-themed pool complex, a shark-filled aquarium, and a massive convention center drawing in tourists, gamblers, and business moguls alike. It was a bold play in a city built on big bets and bigger dreams, and it paid off with packed rooms and a fresh jolt of energy to the Vegas economy. Farther west, along the scenic California coastline, another kind of dream took shape in the form of plastic bricks and brightly colored attractions. Legoland California opened its doors in Carlsbad on March 20th, becoming the first Legoland outside of Europe, aimed squarely at families with young children. The theme park blended interactive rides with elaborate Lego sculptures that turned childhood imagination into tangible fun. Parents across Southern California breathed a collective sigh of relief. Finally, an amusement park that didn't revolve around long lines, oversized mice, or screaming thrill rides. Just a day later, Hollywood lit up with its biggest night of the year as the 71st Academy Awards rolled into the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles on March 21st. The event was a star-studded extravaganza hosted by Whoopi Goldberg and beamed into millions of homes. Shakespeare in Love surprised many by taking home the Oscar for Best Picture, edging out the presumed favorite, Saving Private Ryan. Still, Steven Spielberg didn't leave empty-handed. He won his second Academy Award for Best Director, cementing his legacy as one of cinema's most influential storytellers. The broadcast pulled in more than 45 million viewers, reminding the world that LA, for all its quirks, still knew how to throw one hell of a party. But behind the Hollywood glitz and theme park smiles, a more ominous story was quietly unfolding. On March 25th, energy traders at Enron were discovered rerouting nearly 3,000 megawatts of electricity intended for California into the tiny desert town of Silver Peak, Nevada. Population barely 200. The move on the surface seemed bizarre, but it was part of a deliberate manipulation scheme that allowed Enron to exploit California's newly deregulated energy market for massive profits. At the time, it was barely noticed outside industry circles. But in hindsight, that quiet little maneuver would become an early warning sign of the massive energy crisis California would face just a year later. Rolling blackouts, skyrocketing prices, and the eventual collapse of Enron itself. What began as a footnote in a corporate playbook would eventually become a case study in greed, deregulation, and the dangers of playing fast and loose with public utilities. On April 20th, Columbine High School in the quiet suburban community of Littleton, Colorado, became the site of one of the most devastating school shootings in American history. On that day, 2 students launched a planned and brutal attack on their classmates and teachers, ultimately killing 12 students and 1 teacher before taking their own lives. The shockwaves from the massacre were immediate and far-reaching, piercing the collective national conscience. The tragedy at Columbine did more than just dominate headlines. It cracked open a deeper conversation about American society, sparking urgent debates around gun laws, youth mental health, bullying in schools, and the influence of violent media and video games. School security protocols were suddenly scrutinized, and parents across the country sent their kids to school with a new sense of unease. Politicians, educators, and the public wrestled with how something so horrifying could happen in a place that was supposed to be safe. It marked a turning point in the national dialogue, shifting the conversation from isolated incidents to a broader awareness of systemic issues in schools and communities. For many, it was a moment when the idyllic image of suburban high school life in America shattered, replaced with an urgent question. How do we make sure this never happens again? On May 20th, daredevil Robbie Knievel captured the attention of the nation as he launched himself off a ramp and soared an astonishing 228 feet across a portion of the Grand Canyon on his motorcycle. The stunt was more than just a high-flying feat. It was a quintessentially American spectacle, blending danger, showmanship, and legacy. After all, Robbie was the son of the legendary Evel Knievel. Broadcast live, the jump thrilled millions of viewers and cemented Robbie's own place in the annals of daredevil history, echoing the fearless spirit of the American West. Earlier that month, on May 1st, California's pop culture output delivered something equally iconic, though far less death-defying. SpongeBob SquarePants, a quirky and unusually optimistic sea sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea, made his television debut on Nickelodeon. The show, created by marine biologist and animator Steven Hillenburg, originated in California and quickly caught fire with kids and adults alike, thanks to its absurd humor, colorful animation, and strangely profound optimism. Its arrival lit up living rooms from San Diego to Seattle, hinting at the long-running phenomenon it would soon become. On June 18th, Disney's animated feature Tarzan made its theatrical debut, marking the final installment in what came to be known as the studio's 1990s Renaissance era, a decade-long streak of critically acclaimed, commercially successful films that re-established Disney as the dominant force in animation. With its innovative use of deep canvas technology, a soundtrack from Phil Collins, and a more kinetic, action-driven style, Tarzan swung into theaters to enthusiastic audiences and favorable reviews. It was not only a technical achievement, but also a cultural capstone, closing out an era that had begun with The Little Mermaid in 1989 and redefined animated storytelling for a new generation. Just a few days earlier, on June 12th, political winds were shifting as Texas Governor George W. Bush officially declared his candidacy for President of the United States. His announcement triggered immediate national attention and signaled the beginning of a new political chapter that would heavily involve Western states. With Bush's strong Texas identity, his ties to the oil industry, and a campaign style that blended Southern charisma with Western pragmatism, the West was poised to become a crucial battleground, not just geographically, but ideologically. Las Vegas, a city known for its endless sun, neon-lit nights, and dry desert air, found itself overwhelmed not by tourists or blackjack tables, but by an unexpected and brutal force of nature. On July 8th, a powerful flash flood tore through parts of the city, catching many residents and visitors off guard. The sudden downpour swamped entire neighborhoods, turned roads into rushing rivers, and left hundreds of cars stranded or floating in muddy water. Mobile homes were battered and tossed, property damage soared, and tragically, 2 people lost their lives in the chaos. For all its bravado and engineered glamour, Sin City was reminded that the desert is still wild and nature doesn't gamble. Just 2 days later, and a few hundred miles away, California played host to a moment of pure sports magic. In Pasadena's Rose Bowl Stadium, the final of the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup delivered one of the most iconic moments in American sports history. With over 90,000 fans in attendance and millions watching from home, the United States faced off against China in a tense, hard-fought match that ended in a nail-biting penalty shootout. It was Brandi Chastain who stepped up and nailed the decisive kick, clinching victory for the U.S. and instantly becoming a national hero. Her euphoric celebration, ripping off her jersey and falling to her knees, captured the spirit of triumph and pride, not just for the team, but for women's sports as a whole. It was a defining moment that resonated far beyond the West Coast and solidified 1999 as a landmark year in American athletics. Terror struck painfully close to home in Los Angeles on August 10, 1999, when Buford O. Furrow Jr., a white supremacist with a violent past, stormed into the North Valley Jewish Community Center in Granada Hills and opened fire with a semi-automatic weapon. In a matter of moments, he wounded 5 people, including 3 young children, a teenage camp counselor, and an office worker. After fleeing the scene, Furrow later murdered a Filipino-American postal worker, Joseph Ilido, in what authorities determined was a racially and ethnically motivated killing. The attack sent shockwaves through the city and the nation, reigniting intense public debates around hate crimes, white nationalist violence, and gun control laws in the United States. Parents, community leaders, and local officials expressed outrage and heartbreak as the shooting at a center dedicated to youth programs and peaceful community engagement underscored how vulnerable even the most innocent spaces had become. Politicians and advocacy groups called for stricter background checks and tighter regulations on firearm sales, especially in cases involving individuals with histories of mental illness and extremist affiliations. The West got a notable taste of what the future might look like when Sega's highly anticipated Dreamcast gaming console hit the American market on September 9th. With its sleek design, online capabilities, and a strong lineup of launch titles, the Dreamcast was a bold step forward in gaming technology, grabbing the attention of tech enthusiasts, gamers, and early adopters across the region. But even as shelves in California, Nevada, and beyond were being stocked with the latest in home entertainment, those inventories would soon be tumbling to the floor, especially around Mojave. California got rocked, literally, by the Hectormine earthquake on October 16, 1999. The quake, registering a powerful magnitude of 7.1, struck a sparsely populated area of the Mojave Desert in the early morning hours. But its impact was felt far beyond the epicenter. Although centered in a remote region about 50 miles northeast of 29 Palms, the tremor was strong enough to wake residents in Los Angeles, San Diego, and even parts of Nevada and Arizona. Buildings swayed, windows rattled, and nerves across Southern California were thoroughly shaken. While the damage was relatively limited due to the earthquake's desert location, the psychological jolt it delivered was significant. Californians were reminded once again that they live atop a complex web of fault lines, with the infamous San Andreas Fault looming ominously beneath their feet. Emergency services went on alert, and geologists rushed to analyze the quake's implications, noting its similarity to previous seismic events like the 1992 Landers quake. The Hectormine earthquake didn't cause widespread destruction, but it served as a stark wake-up call about the ever-present geological forces that shape life in the Golden State. Seattle captured national attention in late November when the World Trade Organization protests erupted across the city, transforming its downtown into a chaotic and unforgettable battleground. What began as a planned demonstration against global trade practices quickly spiraled into something far larger and more volatile. Protesters flooded the streets on November 30th, voicing concerns over labor rights, environmental standards, and the growing power of multinational corporations. As tensions rose, clashes broke out between demonstrators and law enforcement. Shattered windows, plumes of tear gas, and heavily armored police created a jarring contrast against the city's usual calm. The unrest forced the cancellation of the WTO's opening ceremonies and disrupted the summit entirely. For many, the battle in Seattle became a defining moment in the anti-globalization movement, a powerful and highly visible rejection of unchecked corporate influence and economic inequality on a global scale. It wasn't just a protest, it was a declaration of purpose, carried out in full view of the world's cameras. Amid the unrest and heavy headlines, moviegoers across the West and beyond found a moment of comfort and joy in theaters as Pixar released Toy Story 2 on November 24th. The sequel to the groundbreaking 1995 film didn't just meet expectations, it soared past them. With its blend of heartfelt storytelling, clever humor, and technical innovation, the film rekindled the magic of the original while carving out its own emotional territory. Audiences young and old were drawn to the story of Woody, Buzz, and the rest of the gang, whose journey delved deeper into themes of loyalty, identity, and belonging. Toy Story 2 didn't just solidify Pixar's reputation for excellence in animation, it reignited the public's interest in sequels, proving that follow-ups could have just as much heart and impact as the originals. In a month marked by protest and disruption, the film offered a welcome escape, reminding audiences of the simple power of good storytelling. As the final month of the Millennium rolled in, the much-hyped Y2K scare loomed large over the country, with fears of technological collapse and computer malfunctions dominating the news. But out west, despite the national anxiety, things remained relatively calm. While some stocked up on bottled water and flashlights, most people in California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and beyond carried on with a mix of skepticism and cautious preparation. The vibe was more curious than panicked. Westerners had lived through earthquakes, wildfires, and flash floods. A computer glitch didn't exactly send them running for the hills. Culturally, December still had a few bright spots. Disney's Fantasia 2000 made a splash with its elegant Carnegie Hall premiere on December 16th, blending old-school orchestration with modern animation to ring out the century with flair. Meanwhile, space enthusiasts were left disheartened when NASA lost contact with the Mars polar lander on December 3rd, just as it was approaching the Martian surface. After years of planning and anticipation, the silence from the Red Planet was a frustrating reminder that space exploration still carried enormous risk, no matter how high-tech the tools. As the clocks ticked toward midnight on December 31st, the western states held their breath. Less in fear and more in curiosity, the air was filled with a strange blend of nostalgia, relief, and quiet anticipation. People gathered at beaches, in the desert, on snowy mountain slopes, and in city streets, waiting to see if the world would go dark or if life would carry on as usual. The year 2000 was an unknown, a clean slate, a wide horizon. But 1999, that was a year to remember. It had everything: roaring triumphs, deep tragedies, cultural shocks, and seismic shifts. It was loud, it was thrilling, it was bizarre, it was heartbreaking. And through it all, the Western U.S. stayed true to itself. Restless, unpredictable, and unapologetically bold.
Come along, let's sing, where the joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you.